I literally got a full part email from the VP of this division of this very large bank. And he goes, "Hey, I'm in the area. Can you grab breakfast this week?" So I said, "Sure." So we go grab breakfast. This seriously, you can die. The first question he asked me is this: "So what's a DSO?"
Oh my God.
Now they just bought a portfolio of all DSO practices.
If you're comfortable, you're not growing. Welcome to another episode of Dental Marketing Theory. I'm your host, Gary Bird. I am the CEO of SMC National. We are a dental marketing company that provides predictable new patients for your dental practices so you can grow the way that you want. And I got a doozy for you today. My friend Jonathan Moffat, CEO of Aligned Advisors, is going to drop some knowledge on you. He absolutely blew my mind over and over and over again. He actually shared how to build your roadmap with us. He also shared some actual examples of how dental offices are failing out there and are shutting down or selling for much less than they should be, and how he took advantage of that. And then also shared how to really navigate the whole banking world, because it's changing right before us now. So you're not going to want to miss this episode. Tell us a little bit about what you do for folks in the dental industry.
Yeah, so my background is my grandfather was a very successful orthodontist in the LA area, had multiple practices. As successful as a orthodontist as he was, he made a lot of really poor choices on the personal side. And so when he was forced to stop practicing due to a heart attack, he and my grandmother lived the remaining couple of years of their life in, kind of on poverty. I mean, really just Social Security. They had very little say. And so in 2008, 2006, my dad and I started a company called DDS Strategies Group. My dad retired. We rolled that into Aligned Advisors with really the passion, a real strong passion and desire to help dentists avoid making the same mistakes I saw my grandfather make. And so what we do for doctors in the dental space is we fulfill a really unique space. We help them get really clear on their goals and we help them create a step-by-step action plan. But then we bring this team of what we call subject matter experts on, and we say, we're going to now oversee the implementation of the plan. So a lot of times when the plans, as you know, this goes for marketing, this goes for anything, the plan usually falls apart, not even necessarily at the planning standpoint, even though less than 5% of dentists actually have a plan for their future. Yeah. It really falls apart at the implementation. And there's a variety of reasons for that, right? Lack of time, lack of knowledge, lack of experience, right? So what we do is we've really tried to take away the biggest obstacle to helping the doctors actually get to where they're going to go, which is the implementation. And we bring our team in and we oversee and drive the implementation so that they actually make forward progress towards achieving their goals.
That's awesome. So first of all, so you went from your family member being in the dental industry and then all the way to starting Aligned. So what were the steps in between that? You owned some practices for a while, right?
I did. Yeah. In 2016, I had a client of mine come to me and he said, "Hey, I've tried starting up multiple practices several times. I can't get it off the ground. I've got one really successful practice, usually how it starts, right? And I'd like to have multiple locations." So in 2016, we bought our first practice together. By 2021, we had purchased our 8th practice. And last year, we sold those practices at a 10 times EBITDA multiple last year. So that was a really good experience for me. I learned a ton. Our team learned a ton. And so when we tell clients and when I do a lot of speaking, I was faculty for Henry Schein's Dental Business Institute, writing a book, do a lot of writing and speaking for different dental associations. And whenever I'm talking to them, I love the fact that we can say, look, I've been where you are, right? Like having that difficult conversation with your office manager or trying to get the front office to, follow up on insurance claims and create systems and processes and protocol and dealing with all the different aspects, getting funding, financing, looking for practices. I've done it all. And so we come with a really unique perspective of the fact that we have done it all. And I think I shared with you, Gary, in our first conversation, I was very fortunate enough to have a partner who was a dentist who was a big believer in the power of marketing. And when he speaks, he talks a lot about in like 07, 08, 09, the last recession we went through, how a lot of the doctors in his area were trying to save money because their practices were decreasing in revenue. So what do? They cut marketing. Well, while they were cutting marketing, he was doubling, tripling, quadrupling
That's
down on
what
marketing.
I did too. Yep.
And he literally tripled his practice in 2 years because of it. Like literally triple his practice.
Henry Ford said cutting your marketing budget to save money is like taking off your watch to stop time.
I like that. I haven't heard that. I like it.
Yeah. So I'm really big on, if it were this year, because we're going into, a recession, the economy's slowing down, who knows how big or small it'll be. But we told our team, we're doubling down on everything. We're doing double. We started 2 new podcasts. We're speaking at more events. We're having more last year we had our first conference. This year we're having 3. Like we're doubling, tripling everything, because that's when you double down, is when people are scared. That's the best time to invest. You're going to get the biggest return. So I'm right there with you. So now that you sold your practice, you probably made a lot of money. Why didn't you go back into doing more practices? Was there a reason for that? Was there a method to going straight to a line? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, so there's this thing called the non-compete. So when you sell, you sign a non-compete, right? That says you're not going to go do exactly what you suggested, right? But the reality is, for me, Aligned Advisors was still going. It wasn't like we sold our practice last year and then I started Aligned Advisors. Aligned Advisors has been going since 2009, 2010, I think is when we started. So this was something that I had done, to help out a friend and a client of mine. 2 was to have experience, right? We got a lot of great experience, firsthand, hands-on experience, which ultimately ends up helping us become better advisors and to advise our clients. So one of the conversations we end up having a lot with clients is one of the common goals. It's actually almost the number one goal for almost all of our clients, is to be able to step away from the chair, right? And in whatever capacity or whatever that looks like to them, whether it's completely stopping dentistry, whether it's adding more locations, whether it's bringing locations into their existing location and creating a bigger, larger single location group with multiple doctors that they then move out of the chair clinically to then supervise and become more of a mentor. Whatever that looks like to them, it's the number one goal that almost every dentist we talk to has. And so we have the path, like literally the roadmap to say, here's how you do it. And here's all the resources and the tools and the teams and the people, right, to be able to grow and actually, achieve that goal of stepping away.
That's so cool.
It was awesome because we got to, again, I get to talk to clients and they're like, man, we're really struggling with da, da, da. I'm like, yep, I've been there. I know that. Here's how we got through it. Here are some tools we used, let's help you get through it. And something that you mentioned about, like, when people are scared in a recession, that's really scary. Recessions are scary. There's always going to be, being in business for yourself, as it's scary, right? Yeah. There's no guarantees. And so one thing I always like to remind people of is when you get yourself in that position where you feel scared or you feel like you don't really know what to go do, take a step back, create a plan, create an action plan, and then start making forward progress. And almost always, whenever you can do that, I know for myself, when I feel kind of scared, not really sure what to do, I'll usually create a plan. How am I going to get out of this? And then once you have a written plan, there's something about knowing, okay, this is how we're going to accomplish this, and gives you a lot more confidence to move forward.
Totally agree. So let's walk through that. So first of all, who's like your normal client? Like who are the main people that are like reaching out to you that you're seeing the most success helping?
Yeah, great question. So we work best with doctors that really want to grow. They're growth minded. They want to grow. Again, like I said, whether it's multiple locations or a single location, multi-specialty practice, they want to grow, right? They've got big goals. They're ambitious. They want to grow. They just need to know how, right? They need to know how. They need to have some of those resources and expertise to guide them. So that's really our best, the doctors that we work best with. We have a kind of a saying that'll say, the average doctor will stop practicing dentistry with probably $1 to $2 million saved up. And really a lot of that is going to come from the sale of the exit of their practice. We work with the top 3% of dentists in the country, and our clients exit dentistry or, step away from the chair with between $15 to $100 million, set aside. So
that's a lot more than 1 or 2 million.
It's a lot more, but again,
it just taking it all to Vegas and putting it on black farm over and over again, or like?
No, it just shows the power of when you have a plan and you execute and you have a team that understands what you do, what you're doing and where you're going and has been there. it's hard to take advice from someone who hasn't been or done what you want to do, right?
Yeah.
Or hasn't at least coached. Maybe they haven't done it, but they're like, look, we've coached 600 doctors through
They're
this.
confident. They're confident in what they're doing because they've done it over. They've gotten the reps in. Yeah.
They've got the reps in, right? And we spend so much of our time, which is fine. It's part of our service. We spend so much of our time teaching and coaching and mentoring advisors on our clients' team, like our advisors, like our clients' CPAs or insurance people or investment advisors, on getting them to understand, this is what the clients are trying to do. This is why the client's not going to put more money into the market, because they're going to put more money into their business. And
it's a bigger return,
right? Yeah, because we know that's how the client's going to get to their goals a lot quicker. It's by reinvesting back into their business, having a plan, and growing it that way.
That's so good. That is amazing. Yeah. So would you say the common person coming to you, they have like one practice, two practices, three practices? Where are they kind of at on that journey?
Yeah, good question. It's about 60% of our clients that we work with have over two practices. We work with groups as large as 42 practices. We've worked with groups as small as two practices. We've helped clients go from 1 to 6, 1 to 7, 1 to 8, 1 to 10 practices. We've helped clients go from 1 to 3 practices. So a lot of times, I think there's some confusion. When I was faculty for Henry Schein Dental Business Institute, I'd fly back to Wisconsin. We'd sit in this room, and these doctors would present their business plans to us. And a lot of times they'd say, we want to grow to 10 locations, or we're going to be the next Heartland, or we're going to do right. And the reality is that I always ask them the same thing. What are you ultimately trying to accomplish? Like, what's the ultimate goal we're trying to accomplish? And for a lot of them, it was just like, well, I don't want to work clinically anymore. I want to have more freedom. I want to have more time. And so what we spend a lot of time doing is helping the clients understand and realize, like, well, what if you could have what you wanted, your ultimate end goal, with only 2 practices, or maybe with 3 practices? Again, we're not trying to limit or diminish the ambition of the doctor to want to grow big and great. Like I said, we've worked with clients who have 42 practices. Like, we've worked with those clients before, but it's just really taking a step back and going, okay, what is it? What's our ultimate end goal that we're trying to accomplish and achieve? So it's about 60% of our clients have more than 2 practices. About 40% have 1, but those single practices, they're usually doing a minimum over $2 million. We have several clients that have practices, single locations, doing $6, $7, $8 million a year. Multi-doctor, multi-specialty. So again, it really depends on the model the doctor is wanting to do, the location, and we're big proponents of helping the doctors own the real estate, and again, having that all be a part of their overall wealth growth plan.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know the 3% thing that you said you worked with the top 3% of dentists. After COVID, we noticed that all of our practices exploded that we worked with, and our business exploded as well. So knee-jerk reaction was, oh, the dental industry must be doing great then, right? And then once I realized what was going on, it was the people who were investing in marketing were crushing it, and the people who pulled back and were scared, they weren't. But also that tendency to want to invest into their future and keep marketing also was prevalent in everything else they were doing. So that 3% that you're talking about, they're growing because they're, even when the rest of the market may be shrinking, which was amazing to me. Once I realized that a lot of the dental industry, a lot of practices actually shrank after COVID and lost out on opportunity. There's that minority that continue to grow. And it sounds like you're attracting those people to yourself, and then you're giving them that roadmap. Does that sound about right?
It does. Yeah. And I think too, the other thing, there's a lot of consultants, there's a lot of people that, are telling the doctors too, don't spend money on marketing, right? Don't spend money in these different areas of your practice, focus more on internal marketing. And that's also true. You do need to focus.
It's not wrong.
Needs to be a part of your marketing plan, right? But you can only, what is the saying? You can only squeeze so much water out of a rock, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Now, you can't double your practice with internal marketing, right? Unless you're really, really small.
Right.
Let's walk through this plan. So I'm a practice. Our average listener has somewhere between around 5 practices, right? So let's say I'm at 5 practices. I've kind of done everything the hard way. Probably my first 1 or 2 practices absolutely crushed. And then office 3 through 5, maybe not as much. I haven't been able to get it off the ground quite as fast. how are you going to help me with that roadmap that you were sharing with me? Is it always client specific? Like, okay, here's it really depends on what they want to do, or is there a formula you usually follow as you look at the offices?
Yeah, it's always client specific because every client is unique in not only what they want to accomplish, but also where they are, right? So typically, as you know, going from 1 to 2, that's a big hurdle. A lot of doctors have a hard time wrapping their head around that. How do I straddle my time clinically between practice 1 and practice 2, right? I bring an associate in. Great. Now you're an absentee owner in not 1 practice, but 2 practices, right? Or a partial absentee owner, right? So there's different challenges and hurdles that come with that. Then you go to 3 practices, there's challenges, 5 practices. So at 5 practices, depending on the revenue size, they're probably facing issues like, how do I get, like they're probably having problems or a hard time finding funding for growth and expansion. Maybe having a hard time with staffing, right? We're hearing that a lot. Although we can come back and revisit that. I do think the pendulum's starting to swing back the other way.
100%
right?
is, yeah. Yep.
So, which surprising, I just wrote an article. Wrote a KOL thing today, and then was on another podcast, and I say the same thing, and people are like, really? I'm like, yes, it is swinging back the other way. We're seeing it. So funding and then practice location, practice acquisition, you're now in an environment where if you have 5 practices and you want to continue to grow your footprint, you're fighting up against Aspen, you're fighting against Heartland, you're fighting against other small to mid-sized DSOs that are competing with that same space. So you start to ask yourself, do we switch to a de novo style? Or do we keep an acquisition style? Do we do a combination of both? And again, there's different models for each of those. Not that you can't do one and can't do the other, but when you're trying to get financing, and one of the reasons why a lot of doctors struggle with getting financing, which I think is probably the number one reason keeping most doctors from expanding as quickly as they want to, is financing. And by the way, I think that's probably a good thing that's keeping them from expanding too quickly, is because because they're kind of all over the place, right? And the banks are now smarter. The private equity is smarter. Money has become a lot more aware of the DSO space. They now know, oh, this is what a good practice or a good group looks like. This is when they should really have their crap together. This is when they should bring on a CFO or a controller, or at least a fractional CFO. This is when they should start, right? The banks now know that. Like I talked to enough banks and private equity and money where they understand it. 5 years ago, they were still kind of like, oh, dental's great. Dental never fails. Well, guess what? Groups are now failing, right? I'm not going to name names, but one of our acquisitions was actually from a very large 200 plus DSO that was basically going bankrupt. And they were really
let's talk about that, because I want to go into that, because this is the first time I've heard somebody approach it from that side. Because what I've always been told is basically dental doesn't fail. Like it's the opposite of business. So there's people out there that overextended themselves. Is that what happened?
Okay. Yes. So we acquired 3 practices of our 8. We acquired from not the same 3 separate groups that were basically filing bankruptcy. We bought one of our practices from this national group. They had 200 plus locations. They were divesting themselves of the entire West Coast, all their West Coast locations, because they basically ran them into the ground. So we picked up a practice that was doing $1.2 million for, I think, right around 200,000. Now, it was a disaster. It was literally a disaster of a practice. And it took us a really long time to get that practice turned around. We bought another practice from a doctor who had ran it into the ground. We bought that one for $50,000. That one was about $800,000. And the last acquisition we made in 2021 was from a doctor who owned 3 practices, grew too quickly, right? And made a lot of really, really poor decisions, grew too quickly, didn't have a plan, didn't have the team to advise him, and filed bankruptcy and lost all 3 practices. And that practice was doing about $875,000 a year in revenue. We bought that practice for $15,000 from the bank. And then we took all the patients and we just merged it into one of our practices that was close by, and it almost doubled that practice revenue from doing that.
So what are the common themes in these practices that are failing? What's the common thread between them?
Yeah. It's really, so each one's going to be a little different, right? The mega group they had 200 plus practices. They had regional managers, CEOs, CFOs. Like they were 200 practices. That's a big group,
It was a
right?
big group, yeah.
That was it was a mismanagement. The main group, the high level, and again, I'll give the full disclosure. I'm making some assumptions because a group that size is going to come to you and be like, let me tell you why we're failing, right? And you can please take our practices off our hands, right? I think it was a pretty painful process for them.
Yeah.
But from what we heard from the banker and the broker, and I physically walked through 4 of these locations. We ended up only buying one, but I walked through 4 of them and heard the staff, and the staff was like, no one's leading us. We don't get any answers. We haven't been paid. The doctors were like, I walked into one of their offices, Gary, in downtown San Diego. They took up an entire floor of this like 18 floor building in downtown San Diego. The place was completely empty. I don't know how many operatories there were. I don't know, 30 maybe. I mean, the place was massive. It was split into general, GP over here, ortho over here, they had oral surgery in the back, specialty. And this place was massive, right? We walk in at like 2:00 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. There was, I think, 1 patient in there, and that was it. So It was just mismanagement at that point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The other ones was no systems and processes. It was, again, no leadership. A lot of times the doctors spread themselves too thin. So you have to be careful. A lot of times, I think a lot of doctors think, well, I'm going to hire an associate. I'm going to plug them into this practice, and then it's going to run itself. And then I get to go focus on this practice over here. Right. And that's not how it works. It's not plug and play. You have to realize when you go from 1 practice to 2+, you are no longer running a dental practice. You are running a business, and you have to think and you have to act and perform like a CEO of a business, which means you better spend the time and the money and the resources in investing in systems and processes. You better spend the money and time in investing in training your staff, creating a culture, having a pathway for your associates, right? So
it's not easy because a lot of people act like it's easy, but it's I think the nuance there, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'd love your feedback on this. So it takes a long time to become a good dentist, a really long time. Like it's a lot of work, but it takes just as much time and effort to become a good CEO, and it's a totally different skill set. It's like learning 2 different things. And so if you what I used to think was, I'm really good at dental marketing, so of course I can lead, a 100-person team and grow a company. Of course I can, no problem, because I'm good at dental marketing. Wrong. You know what I mean? Like not even close. It has nothing to do with each other. Yes, I know I'm a subject matter expert, but that has nothing to do with how to run a team meeting, how to run, finances, legal, HR. I didn't know any of that stuff. So is that where kind of the pitfall comes for a lot of people as they start to grow?
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing that I talk a lot to my clients about is, and we have, we did our first 2, we did 2 of our first live workshops this last year. And something I talk a lot about is focus in on what you're really good at. What are the things you really love to do? So if you're like, hey, I love mentoring, I love kind of being that clinical director, but I really don't love the business side of things, hire someone, get someone to partner with you. Again, what's interesting about this, Gary, is when you see, and I'm going to speak a little bit in general as just like kind of general term, right? But generally what we see is when you have a doctor who's just, I'm Dr. Smith, and I'm going to go from my big practice and I'm going to start growing my practice. I'm going to do it on my own. It's going to take them, what I've seen, a lot longer than I'm Dr. Smith. I'm going to bring my buddy Gary in. I'm going to offer Gary to either buy in or give him some equity or an opportunity to earn equity. And he's going to partner with me. And Gary's not a dentist, but he knows business and he's good at business. When you can structure it like that, they grow exponentially faster than the doctor that says, I'm going to try and do this on my own, because it's just too hard to focus on. You have to keep, to your point, and this is something I think a lot of doctors sometimes forget, is that the dental practice is really 2 different businesses, right? You're running the clinical business and you're running the actual business. And when you take that to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 12, 15 locations, you're going to get stretched really thin if you're still trying to do, between you and I think at 2 locations, you're going to be stretched.
Yeah.
Really
well, it gets exponentially harder.
Right.
It's like that drawing. I don't know if you've ever seen it before, where it's like, okay, you have a ring, you have a dot here and a dot here. And it's like, okay, the communication goes here to here. and then they add a third one, and then it's like, okay, now there's 3 lines, and then a fourth one. Now there's not just the 4 lines across, then they go diagonally.
Right.
Yeah, and then you add 2 more dots, and it gets exponentially harder. That's just a communication illustration too, where it's just showing you the dots, and it's just like it gets so confusing. But let alone clinical, all of your supplies, the financials, like it just gets harder and harder and harder and more complicated. Not by a multiple of 1 each time, but it compounds over and over and over again. And that's why knowing all business, I think all business is who you know. It's all about connections and knowing the right people to be able to help you through those rough spots.
Right. No, for sure. And look, there are businesses out there that and services out there that can help you, that you can leverage in, like for insurance verification or, revenue cycle management, or one of the companies I started is a company called DSO CFO. It's a fractional CFO company for DSOs, right? Because we know that when doctors get to 2-3 locations, they can't afford a controller or a CFO, but they really outgrow their bookkeepers and their CPAs. And so there's a bridge there to when you get to 10 locations and you can bring in a controller, right? So you can leverage services out there like that. And I think that that's good, but you still have to manage those services. You still have to manage those systems or have someone to manage them. And again, that's another big mistake that I see. They'll say, oh, we hired XYZ company to do our revenue cycle management or insurance verification or, follow up on insurance claims. And they're like, nope, they've got it. And then they just let that go. And then they're a month, 2 months, 3 months later, they're like, how come my AR hasn't gotten better? How come why aren't we still, verifying insurance before patients come in? So it's because you still have to have someone overseeing and managing that. And it really, to your point, exponentially gets so much more demanding on your time and stress and you as an individual that what we've seen is when you have someone who can kind of help with that heavy lifting on the business side, or on the clinical, and you focus on the business, but you have someone to kind of help lift that, you're going to grow a lot quicker. Yeah,
that's amazing. That's great advice. So if you had a bunch of doctors, they're trying to grow their practice, they got growth mindset, but they haven't exactly had the rocket ship growth yet that they want, and you had them all in a room and you could say anything to them, what would be the one thing that you would say to them?
That's a big question. Have a plan and stick to it. That's kind of, I don't know, it might sound like a little cliche, but have a plan and stick to it. I'd say, so this is interesting. I'll give you, again, kind of to go back to my experience with DBI, because in that area, in that environment, what would happen is doctors would go through this program, and unfortunately the program is no longer live. They moved online, but they would come in and they would present their business plans to a panel of experts, and then they'd get feedback. And as crazy as this sounds, a lot of them would actually, in fact, most of them would show up to that meeting without a business plan. They had a year to put the business plan together, a year. And they would show up without that and paid a ton of money and travel and time, but they'd show up without that plan. So you get to a point where you can only wing it. You can wing it for only so long, right? At some point, you're going to actually need to know, because if you don't, you're going to have people around you that are asking questions and they're going to know really quick. Again, I was talking to a banker on Friday, and he's like, we've been doing this long enough. We can tell within 5 minutes whether a doctor has their stuff together or not. And there's
what did he say? What did he say was like the main thing that triggered them that the doctor doesn't have their stuff together?
It's just, again, it's just the plan. So tell us about what your next acquisition looks like. That one question, right? Yeah. Well, we're looking at this one. We actually have an LOI at this one practice, and it's in this little town that we think is great. But we also identified this other location to do a de novo. Like, oh, great. Have you ever done a de novo before? Well, no, but I think of this. It's like, you're toast. How long? I don't know. How long was that, Gary? 60 seconds?
Yep.
90 seconds? Yep. You're toast. Literally toast. Because again, the money has gotten a lot smarter. They know. You go to any conference, I talk to private equity, to these DSOs, large DSOs, small DSOs, banks every single day.
They've all, because they're getting their reps in, right? So they're buying practices and they're like, oh, we got burnt here one time. That's not going to happen again.
You got it. I was just going to say that. They've been burned and they've learned from that, and they're like, this will not happen again, right? And so to your point, and so they're learning, and now they just know a lot quicker than they did,
So what do you think is going to happen with money? Because money's slowing down and everything, right? It's harder to get a loan for anything. It's tougher to, private equity is not coming in the way that they were before. At least that's what I've been told. What is your look on getting access to money so you can grow?
We're seeing the same thing. I mean, loans, literally 12 months ago, loans that were taking 45 to 60 days to close are now taking 6 months plus to close, if they close at all, right? A lot of times. And so I think there's a combination of things that are happening. Again, COVID was a big thing. You made a comment earlier, Gary, like, well, I thought dentistry didn't fail. Guess what? So did a lot of other people. And then COVID hit. And then when the doctors were like, I can't make payroll. What do you mean you can't make payroll?
Yeah.
Do you have savings? I don't have any savings, right? That was the first time that banks and the money realized, whoa, there's maybe this isn't as stable as an industry as we originally thought. Yeah, these doctors make a lot of money, but guess what? They also spend a lot of money, right? And again, we work with the top 3% of dentists, and the clients we work with, we coach and teach and put plans in place to say, you need to have a reserve, you need to have an emergency fund, you need to have savings, you need to be fiscally responsible. Hold off on buying that Porsche 911 for another 18 months until X, Y, or Z, then buy the Porsche 911, right?
No, don't put all your money into Bitcoin and leverage it and reinvest it back into Bitcoin,
but
right?
Bitcoin's up 3 times this year, right? Yeah. So the point is that the money's getting a lot smarter. So to answer your question, how do you get access to the money? You have to be your business has to be a lot better. You have to be running leaner. You better have your financials in a good place. Again, that's probably one of the biggest things we see is that a client will get financials from a client will be like, oh man, these are a mess. And then we spend time cleaning them up, or they'll go directly to the bank, and the bank's like, what's this? What's that? There's calculations that a lot of the doctors, advisors, don't know. There's EBITDA, which we're all familiar with now, but there's also adjusted EBITDA. And then, when you go through an acquisition, they're going to look at the adjusted EBITDA, but different groups are going to make different adjustments. Some will add back the management fee. Some won't add back the management fee. Some may add back only 5% of the management fee. Some will make you pull money out for health insurance. There's all these components and different moving pieces where, again, depending on how you're getting that money from, we're seeing a lot more creative options, which I think that's inevitable, right? So you have a market where your traditional banks are maybe a little harder. They're holding on to those funds a little bit more. Then you're going to have smaller and more regional banks that are going to step up. I tell clients all the time, if you have a small regional bank that you have a good relationship with, or maybe you don't have a good relationship, I would go have a good relationship with them. A lot of times those small regional banks are going to end up funding your growth and your vision because they know, if I need to talk to Gary, he's a 5-minute drive down the street. I can walk into his office and be like, hey, Gary, what the heck, dude? Why didn't you pay last month's loan, right? Or whatever, right? Or we didn't get your financial. So they
also have a better idea what's going on in that market too. If you're in rural town, Nebraska versus San Diego or San Francisco, those banks know what's going on and it's growing and it's going to be and there's not a lot of dentists moving here. They can actually go see that themselves.
Right. And the banking financing, I actually love that topic. And I'm speaking in 2 weeks at Crown Council about this topic. But what's interesting too is, on one hand, I think because banks have kind of led us to believe that the banks hold all the cards. And although they may hold some cards, they don't hold all the cards. And so a lot of times what we will do for clients is we'll actually go in and negotiate with the banks. And we'll negotiate like loopholes. We'll negotiate ways for the doctors to, hey, if this doesn't happen, then the bank doesn't have you by their, 3-year prepayment penalty or 5-year prepayment penalty where you can't get out of that loan. One of the ways we grew so quickly was because we had a bank, and it was a regional / national bank. It was a national bank, but they were regionally in our region, and they weren't like a big bank. But they rolled out a program to help us grow so quickly where they would give us a guidance line, not a line of credit, but a guidance line. So they'd say, you have $2 million that's been basically pre-approved by the bank to go buy practices. As long as the practices look like this, we'll fund your growth in 30 days. We'll fund that acquisition in 30 days. If it doesn't look like that, it may take us a little bit longer, but you have this guidance line. So then we go by a practice. They'd say everything looks good. We cash flow for a month or two, and then they'd reload our guidance line back up to $2 million.
Yeah, which is amazing. Can you share what happened at the end of that? I know we've talked about that before.
Yeah, what happened at the end of that?
Yeah.
So with ours, yeah. So the bank ended up selling the portfolio to another bank, and that other bank bought the portfolio. I don't know why they bought the portfolio, but they did with a different belief. So basically, funds dried up, and they said, and they actually,
I'm sure they called you and warned you, right? They said a year out, they were like, "Hey, we're changing, we're gonna sell you, and it's gonna probably affect your business plan."
Of course not. They wouldn't do that. No, what happened is we got a phone call, or maybe it was an email from it seriously doesn't get better than this. I literally I had a phone call or email from the VP of this division of this very large bank. And he goes, "Hey, I'm in the area. Can you grab breakfast this week?" I'm like, "Okay." Oh, he goes, "My name's such and such. We just bought the book of business from this other bank. I'm now kind of overseeing all these portfolios. Can we go grab breakfast?" And I said, "Sure." So we go grab breakfast. Seriously, you can die. The first question he asked me is this: "So what's a DSO?"
Oh my God.
Now they just bought a portfolio of all DSO practices, all DSO groups, a portfolio of them. I don't know how many millions of dollars that portfolio, or tens of millions it was, but I literally spent an hour at breakfast with this guy who's now running our loan.
Explain what a DSO is.
First question is, what's a DSO? And I was like, well, this is not going to go great.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a rough relationship. We kind of were stuck there until we sold. We still did acquire 2 additional practices, but we did it out of cash flow instead of going through the bank. But yeah, I mean, just again, there's obviously nothing like that was totally out of our control, right?
Yeah.
Like nothing I can do about that. We were stuck again. We still continued to negotiate. So we negotiated, if we can get someone to take over the portfolio, will you waive all the remaining prepayment penalties, which they did agree to. We negotiated a rate adjustment.
So the reason I wanted you to share that story is, number one, curveballs are going to happen.
100%.
You knew what you were doing, and you still got the craziest curveball thrown in your lap. But number two, it's you have to then do the best that you can do with that, and you do that by working with people that know what they're doing.
Right. And I'll be the first to tell you, as my partner with GC right too, he's like, he would actually probably say the name of the bank. I won't. But it was a painful 2 years. It was a really painful 2 years. Every month we'd have to get on a phone call, and it was really painful. So, but like you said, that's life. That's business. That's going to happen. You have to be able to roll with it. You can't, I feel like a lot of times it's easy as just human beings, it's human nature to kind of feel like, oh, I just got this huge setback or this big blow, and now my life is ruined. My life is over. And it's not. It's just like, okay, this is a chance to reevaluate. Okay, we thought we were going on this path. It looks like we're going to have to maybe take a little bit of a detour, right? And so it's just time to reevaluate. And to your point, when you're working with, one of the reasons why, and I am a big proponent of this, I preach this all the time. When you work with a group of people that have been where you are, have been to where you want to be, and been to where you want to go, and have coached others to that place, they are going to be your biggest champions during those times, because they're going to say, hey, it's okay. Here's how we're going to get through that. I know you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we can. And here's how we're going to navigate through this, right? And
so good.
It's so important to have people that really have that understanding and that experience to be able to coach you through those times.
That's so good. Well, this has been amazing. Such good content. Any closing thoughts or anything I forgot to ask you about?
No, I don't think so. I know you get sent over a questionnaire and there's a bunch of stuff on there, but no, I think it's an exciting time in dentistry. I think it's, again, there's always a fear factor, right? If we weren't in a recession, guess what people would be saying? The DSOs are taking over and corporate dentistry.
It's always fear,
right? It's always going to be something, right?
Yeah.
XYZ dental insurance is taking all of your profits, and it's always going to be something. You can't hire associates. Staff is too expensive. All your staff's going to quit. Good luck finding a hygienist. It's always something. It's part of life. And guess what? There will always be something.
Yep.
Right. So we're going to get through a recession. The people the top 3%, right, that you and I work with they're going to double down on marketing. They're going to double down on their business plan. Because guess what happens during times of recession? Amazing opportunities.
Huge.
Right?
Yep.
you get to multiply your wealth, multiply your business by multiples. So I think it's exciting. I think it's an exciting time in dentistry. I think actually all the growth and momentum in DSO is actually a good thing for private practice and for dentistry as a whole. And I think there's massive amounts of wealth to be made. And I'm excited about it. So my little shameless plug is, we're doing we call it Step Away Workshop. It's a 2-day workshop. And basically we help the doctors formulate their plan and then actually put pen to paper. So they leave that 2 days with an actual plan.
How can people get a hold of you for that? Like, if that's what I was actually going to go, is like, how can people reach out to you and actually get this value firsthand?
Yeah. So our first event's not till June. So if they don't want to wait till June, if you want information on the workshop, they can go to stepawaytoday.com. That'll have some information on the workshop. But if they want to get a little bit sooner, we do what's called a 60-minute roadmap session. It's not a sales call. We're not signing. We just literally walk them through the first couple steps of getting them clear on what they want to do and where they want to go, and then benchmark where they are today. They can email us at J Moffat, just the letter J, and then Moffat, Moffat, at Aligned Advisors. That's ALIGNED ADVISORS.com. And they can set up we happen to set up a roadmap with them and give them any additional information. We have a ton of resources that we give out for free just to help doctors, help them. A lot of the resources I developed and a lot of the systems and protocols I developed with my group, we just give away. We'll just give that away.
That's awesome.
To help them if they get stuck.
Yep. That's so cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on. You did a great job, and this is going to be a great episode. I know people are going to eat it up.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Gary. I appreciate it.